With Dragonflight now only being 3 weeks away, we are starting to see Blizzard really hone in on some small adjustments to tuning and bug fixes. So I figured this would be the perfect time to actually give my latest impressions about some of the tanks. I've already gone over the Vengeance Demon Hunter, Protection Paladin, and Guardian Druid, so if you missed those videos, go check them out. But in this video, we're going to be focusing on the Protection Warrior. This is a class that paid the BFA tax, and quite heavily. For the first time in 2 years, it's actually not only looking competitive again, but also crazy enjoyable. Obviously, this is still beta, and there are still a ton of possibilities for change, so that's something that we need to keep in mind. I plan on rolling out these videos for each and every tank, so if that's something that interests you, feel free to subscribe. It's free after all. With that out of the way, let's break down the tree and talk about why you should probably be a warrior main in 10.0. As most of you know, I'm mostly a Mythic Plus player, so when I'm talking about these trees, I'll be regarding to 5-man content. My general thoughts for all tanks and raid is that they're all viable in some way, and they mostly bring something of value, whether it's a group buff, utility, or cooldown. So let's take a gander at the top of the warrior class tree. To start, we can actually see that we're given both defensive and battle stance. Unlike most other class trees for tanks, this actually gives us a ton of flexibility right off the bat. We can either focusing on going hard left or hard right, while also still being able to not sacrifice points later on because of the pathing in the tree, and honestly, chef's kiss. What I typically have been playing in Mythic Plus goes as follows. We take War Machine and then Spell Reflect, because this tool is just way too strong to pass up both as a defensive and as an offensive ability. We're then going to grab Heroic Leap for mobility and Thunderclap for, well, it's our main source of AoE damage in dungeons. Personally, I like to grab Leeching Strikes, and then I shift my focus back to the left side of the tree where I pick up Fast Footwork and Frothing Berserker. And then this is where the tree gets really interesting, because with this setup, we're now going to have access to all of the capstones. So this point is more for utility or preference. So depending on the dungeon or group comp, I'm going to probably pick Rallying Cry for, as a cooldown or as a personal defensive. But if I want to get a little bit more on-demand healing, I can grab Impending Victory. If we need a little bit more CC, we can actually then just grab Intimidating Shout. No matter what I really choose here, I think it's worth the point. In a lot of other class trees, you want to try to minimize the points you spend in the first tier, but for the warrior, that's not necessarily the case. We're going to actually see ourselves possibly coming back up here later on, but let's grab Rallying Cry and move into tier 2. But damn, I still just can't get over how great the movement in this tree actually feels. We're going to pick our talents here first, and then I'll talk about some of the flexible options later. So for me personally, what I've been playing is I take Stormbolt, Barbaric Training, and then Seismic Reverberation. These talents really focus more on the AoE damage side of things, plus the CC. And then we're going to go back and pick up Blood and Thunder. This is the main node that will have a massive synergy with our Spec tree later on, which I'll talk about. Shifting our focus slightly back though, we're going to look at the left side of the tree where we're going to sink 2 points into Crushing Force, Pain and Gain, and Reinforced Pleats. The rest of these points are fairly subjective where you want to place them. With 4 points left, we have a lot of wiggle room here. If you want to minimize the options in tier 2, you can just pick up Double Time and then focus on tier 1 talents if you really desire. But for me personally, I'm going to take Double Time with Bounding Strides, Honed Reflexes, and then Titanic Throw. Titanic Throw has proven to be incredibly useful, especially with how high some of these DPS classes are opening for. I'm mostly referring to Demon Hunters, Warriors, and Monks. But you can open with a throw weapon, which now cleaves 5 nearby enemies, and it's going to generate high threat. So I've noticed that this has given me the edge when either starting a pull or pulling extra mobs into the pull later on. You can easily drop Honed Reflexes or Titanic Throw for something like Bitter Immunity if you believe it's going to be useful in certain dungeons. In this case, we could also bring one of these points back up to the first tier by grabbing Impending Victory if we want to, or we can grab Furious Blows for more damage. What I'm trying to show is that it's pretty easy to make a lot of different trades here, which will provide utility for either necessity or preference. With tier 3 unlocked, we now have 11 points and a bunch of absolutely fabulous capstones to explore, so I think something that is going to be non-negotiable though is Avatar. This talent capstone area will provide a good amount of synergy with anger management in the Spec tree, and it typically provides a good chunk of your damage and snap threat each pull. So we're going to be picking up Armored to the Teeth to grab Avatar and then Unstoppable Force. Now, I've seen a lot of suggestions to the last area of this tree, and when I originally started playing with the Warrior, I thoroughly enjoyed Thunderous Roar alongside the Amplified talent nodes, but playing this entire capstone area is going to cost us 5 of our 7 remaining points. And while Thunderous Roar provides a decent bit of burst with synergies with like Blood and Thunder, Ren, Deep Wounds, Bloodboard, and Blood Surge in the Spec tree, I just think that we need to focus on what's important for each dungeon that we might find ourselves in. So while the bleed build is insanely fun, if you find yourself needing a little bit more diversified kit, I've been actually playing Endurance Training into Shockwave and then both of the capstones here, Sonic Boon and Rumbling Earth. This turns Shockwave into just like this massive AoE nuke on a very short cooldown and larger pulls. There are also some pretty great hybrid builds as well, so if you want to go for just Shockwave as a utility option, you can stop at Shockwave and then put the rest of the talent points into Thunderous Roar if you wish. You can then build into Thunderous Roar with one or both of the capstone options. If you decide to play both though, you are going to be giving up one-handed specialization, which is arguably way more impactful than the other capstone. Warrior has always struggled with self-healing, and now that they not only have Siphoning Strikes in their first tier, but also have Leech provided by one-hand spec, you can now have just a flat 10% based Leech, which turns Thunderous Roar or Amplified Shockwave into just like this massive heal alongside the rest of your damage. Personally, I've been playing the Shockwave nodes, but there are just some great flexible options here. The only thing that I dislike about this tree is Spear of Bastion. It was a great ability in Shadowlands, but I kind of wish it stayed there. It just really can't compete with some of the other capstones in this tree regarding Mythic Plus. I see it more as like an odd type of CC and probably has its niche somewhere, but personally, I just can't see any serious production warrior playing this talent in Mythic Plus. But who knows? I would love to be proven wrong with either, some last minute buffs to this ability or some secret root tech. Either way, this tree is surprisingly flexible, and there are enough good options to make choosing between a few of these actually kind of difficult, but they also provide enough choice to cater to your build or to your group comp or the type of content. So let's move on to the Spec tree. I'm going to go over the build that I've been running, explain some of the synergies and what is making this class work so well, and then I'm going to talk about some of the different options and builds that I've seen. Sound good? Let's go. Starting the tree, we must take Ignore Pain, which, unlike Maul for the Guardian Druid, is absolutely fine. Following this, we're going to actually have to take Revenge, and then we have 3 different paths that we can go down. For me personally, I've been aiming to hit all 3 paths by picking Demoralizing Shout, Devastator, and Last Stand. Then we are going to grab Master of Cold, Strategist, and Unnerving Focus. Most, if not all of these abilities were something that we had in Shadowlands because we were used to having them in the base warrior kit, besides like Unnerving Focus, which was one of the more popular conduit choices. This top of the tree is actually much less flexible than the class tree, but it still provides really good pathing regardless. If we wanted, we could totally ignore part of the tree and we can find ourselves with lateral movement later on down the road. Now that we have access to the center of the tree, we can actually pick up a ton of juicy toolkit options, as well as certain passives that make the warrior extremely enjoyable to play. For me, Rend and Blood Surge are a must. It provides much more sustained damage through bleeds, and now our bleeds have a chance to grant us 5 rage. This will typically result in 5 to 10% more rage generation depending on proc chance and type of pull, but I think it's a perfect substitute since we no longer have Conqueror's Banner. Naturally, we are also going to grab Shield Wall alongside Anger Management. Now, as we spend Rage, we're actually going to be able to reduce the CD of not only our avatar from the class tree, but also Shield Wall defensive cooldown from the Spec tree. I'll come back to the center here in a bit, but let's quickly pick up some of our major talents on the left side, including Challenging Shout, Thunderlords, Show of Force, and Into the Fray. Show of Force alongside Thunderlords provides massive synergies with Avatar, providing even more damage through ability weaving with Revenge and Thunderclap, and during this window we're actually going to generate a ton of rage, which will lower the cooldown on both Avatar and now Demoralizing Shout, giving us more uses, which means more rage, which means more recovery, and you can see why this class is just so sick. It just has a bunch of mini and major feedback loops that provide a very satisfying feeling. With 4 points left, there are some pretty solid pickups. Personally, I prefer Brutal Vitality and Impenetrable Wall since we no longer have Unbreakable Will as an option. Rest in peace, Group Wall. There are some really cool options at this point. Tough as Nails provides a ton of extra threat generation and a pretty decent passive overall. You can also pick up things like Spell Block as an additional defensive. This could provide to be extremely useful in dungeons like Shadow Moon Burial Ground or Ruby Life Pools. Bloodborne is also really amazing if you're playing like a bleed-centric build, but that's more for damage than anything. We also have Bolster making its glorious return to being a 2-minute cooldown and granting you shield block for the full duration. Players who enjoyed BFA Warrior will enjoy seeing this again. You can also grab Enduring Defenses if you wish. But in a general scenario, the build that I've mostly been playing is including Tough as Nails and Enduring Defenses. We're going to actually have a few extra points to spend later on, and we can revisit the second tier. The center of the tree is kind of like uber powerful, so let's put our focus here first. Not only does it have incredibly fun powers like Indomitable and Violent Outburst and Battle-Scarred Veteran, but it also has really solid connecting nodes allowing us to access Ravager and Shield Charge. 2 points into shield specialization, Booming Voice, Indomitable, Violent Outburst, and Battle-Scarred Veteran is what I've been playing recently, which encompasses basically everything down here. Then we can actually grab both Shield Charge in one of its empowered nodes, Champion's Bulwark. This is going to grant us even more rage generation. It provides a pretty good single target stun if needed, and the Champion's Bulwark talent grants us shield block and revenge proc, which is perfect for not only threat but extra damage, because who doesn't love like a little nuke button? With the last few points, I've been playing around a lot with some of the different options like Focus Vigor for 5% strength and armor, or Ravager for more AoE. With Ravager now being like a 1.5 minute cooldown though, I personally don't find it to be as impactful for rage generation as it might be for damage. There are times where I will run it, like in Algothar Academy on larger pulls, or the Overgrown Ancient boss fight, for example. If I don't feel like I need a point there, sometimes I'll actually go for Punish instead, giving a pretty good single target boost for damage and damage reduction on boss fights. For a little bit more sustained damage, you can also look back into the second tier options with either like Bloodborne or extra CC with Disrupting Shout, or just like an extra defense with Bolster. Overall, I think this tree is pretty insane for both talents in the later tiers and the earlier tiers. For players who are just looking to get KSM, it's pretty easy to maximize their damage by just dropping Battle-Scarred Veteran, for example, and picking up extra talent centered around maybe Ravager or Shield Charge. There are also a good bit of single target damage options for those pesky high tyrannical boss fights, or really good defensive options for spellcasts like Spell Block that will actually be centered around maybe like dungeon or group composition, or maybe even weekly affixes. Overall, I'm extremely happy with the Protection Warrior. I'm asked a lot on stream and in Discord, and I see a lot of your comments down in the comment section about you're maybe on the fence about what tank to main. My answer is this class right here. Protection Warrior hasn't felt this good in a very, very long time. Despite what damage tuning and numbers look like, the rotation is stupid good, and the feedback loops are just like extremely rewarding and satisfying. The bar for entry is pretty low, but the skill expression is extremely high, so you can push this class as far as you'd like. But those are my thoughts and impressions for the Protection Warrior. I'm extremely excited to see how this spec is going to perform both inside and outside of Mythic Plus, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are down below. Are there any cool spell reflect texts that you've found yet? I know I have. Insert fake laugh here? Teehee. Anyways, huge shout out to all my patrons who give their actual dollars and dimes to allow me to make, like whatever you call this. So I hope you're all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.